had a couple of more people come in, so that worked out. That worked out really well. So now, at the top left slide, you'll see a dormer, a little dormer that was added to the front of the house. That would make that a non-contributing structure. It's not something that you can easily reverse. And then on the top right, that house has had multiple alterations. And then on the bottom left, they enclosed a garage and altered the front porch. And it looks like they expanded all the way around the front. And then on the bottom, that's just the entire porch. It's not something that you would see in some of our historic districts. Now this next slide, there's 4 pictures here. These are some items that are structures that were potentially contributing when we went through and did some of our historic district designation. So on the top right, if the alteration was a porch column, and then the top right you had another dormer. The bottom left they had asbestos siding, and then the bottom left they had asbestos siding. The bottom right they had enclosed a porch. Those alterations that we think could have been changed, and those structures were classified as potentially contributing. So when you think about a contributing historic structure with no alterations, you tend to think about somebody who could go back to the house from the time period that it was built and recognize the structure. That would be a good example. Yeah, Vicki, where are you? I can walk through the historic district designation, but you're in a different process. Do you want me to go through that, or I can skip over it? Okay.
I'm sorry, I know I'm not supposed to ask this question. Very quickly, so you're just pointing out contributing and non-contributing. Is it addresses the board members, the 4 board members who must live in a contributing and non-contributing house? Is that what you're showing?
They must know. The ordinance, when we go through and create a historic district, we look at the inventory,
okay,
and then we classify the structures as contributing or non-contributing. We used to have 3 categories, and with the contributing, potentially contributing, and non-contributing, and we captured the potentially contributing and contributing into one definition now, and we're calling it contributing. So we have 3 classifications for structures. One thing I will note is if you have a district that is pending, such as Woodland Heights, you will need to go through a certificate of appropriateness for alterations to your structures. So that's really important to note. And you will do that until the Historic Commission makes a decision. If they say no, Planning Commission says no, that's the end of the process, then you don't need it. But as long as it's pending and it's going through Historic Commission, Planning Commission, you still have a yes that you're going to be a historic district, then you will need to get a certificate of appropriateness unless we exceed 180 days. So essentially we have 180 days to process the historic district designation. So I'm going to talk about certificate of appropriateness. There's been some confusion about when a certificate of appropriateness is or is not required. You're not required a certificate of appropriateness for ordinary maintenance and repair. So if you have just a little bit of wood siding that you need to go in and repair and paint over, you can do that. If you have a window where you need to work on the framing of it and you're just putting back a little bit of wood, that's just normal maintenance. You don't need it for a mailbox. You don't need a certificate appropriate for a fence. To change your light fixtures, you don't need it. What we care about overall is the exterior structure, so you can do whatever you want on the interior of a historic structure. We're not going to review it. Okay, so you can make as many changes inside. If the structure was damaged by no fault of the property owner, so you had a storm come through or there was fire, then you can rebuild that structure in its original form, architectural elements, same footprint, okay? It has to look identical to what it was before it was damaged. You can do whatever you want on the inside. So if you want to completely change it, you can do that on the inside. Let me touch quickly on re-roofing. You can re-roof a historic structure without a certificate of appropriateness, but if you change the roof material or you change the roof at all, in terms of, let's say you put on a different type roof, a different pitch on the roof, then you will need to come before the Historic Commission. But if all you're doing are taking off shingles and putting more shingles back on, just what was there before, go on. You don't need a certificate of appropriateness. You do need a certificate of appropriateness for new construction. If you're adding to the exterior, you're doing an addition to the building, or if you're going to relocate or demolish a contributing structure, you will need a certificate of appropriateness. And we have staff members that are willing to sit down with you and talk to you. If you're thinking about adding on and you have some questions, come down and visit with them before you hire somebody so that you can get an idea of what would be appropriate. And then we'll willingly meet with, if you hire someone, we'll meet with them as well to help guide you through the process. We want to do that. Let me talk a little bit about new construction. And when I say new construction, I'm really talking about starting from ground up. It must be compatible with the contributing structures in the historic district. Now, what I'm saying is I'm not asking for a duplicate. I'm not asking for us to replicate structures built back in the 20s. What we're talking about are, in many of our districts, they have front porches. We'd like front porches. We are not interested in if the columns are square or round, but it's the fact that you have elements. So the windows, they're taller than they are wide. That's what you find generally in some of our older historic districts. We also will look at the roof line to make sure the proportion of the roof line is consistent within the district. And in terms of the height, we're going to look at the typical eave height of contributing structures within the district. And then on commercial properties, because there are a few commercial buildings within our districts, we're going to look at the height of the existing commercial structures. And we're going to look at the height of the roof line. And then here's some slides of appropriate new construction. Let's go on to the next slide. And if you look at this one, you'll see that the windows are taller than they are wide. They have a front porch. The garage is in the rear, so you don't have that garage that's right up front. That's usually in our historic districts, those garages are back away from the street. All right, let's talk about additions because I think there's some confusion, and I know there's confusion, and I'm going to walk you through, give you some examples, and this is where we really added some slides. The ordinance has for certificate of appropriateness about 11 core criteria that we review certificate of appropriateness for. However, what we decided to do is we wanted to put what I would call incentives, and the incentives are to locate the additions to the rear, to do it to the side, or to do like a camelback. And I'm going to walk through them in just a minute. But the goal was is if you locate them back where they're not so much towards the front of the structure, then we put some shall approves, and you have fewer criteria to review for. Okay? So it was really done as an incentive. So let's walk through, and here's an example of a camelback. And you'll see that that camelback, if it's back 50% of the way, then we're going to be, and you meet one other criteria, you'll be in a shall approve. So we're not going to get so much into the windows and the materials if you meet these shall approve criteria.
What is that word? Shall? What?
Shall approve. Means they must approve.
Okay. Will approve.
I'm sorry, it's, that's a good, I'll try to remember to do that. We call it a shall approved because it's the way legal writes our ordinances, and it's must.
And what's 50% of what?
Halfway back the length of the structure. Okay.
She's still looking. Yeah, she's still looking puzzled. Yeah. If your house is 100 feet deep and you start your addition 50 feet back, that meets the shall approve. Am I correct, Marlene?
That's right. That's right. And then the next criteria that you have is that that second story for the camelback cannot be more than 1 1/4 taller than your ground floor there. So we measure from the plate height, or the plate height, which is your subfloor, all the way up to the top of the framed wall. and then you can go 1 1/4 times taller for your camelback at the rear. Now that is not, it does not include your roof. Okay, wall. That's just, we're just looking at your wall. Here's a good example of a camelback. We'll be with you after the meeting if you have any questions, and we'll walk through and answer it. And we'll give you back, we're going to put this PowerPoint online. So this is a camelback. Here's another example where somebody added to the rear of their house. This isn't a full, well, I wouldn't call it a full camelback, but it is where somebody added towards the back half of their house. Now on side additions, they're a little different. So if your house is 60 feet, excuse me, if the length of your house is say 60 feet, then 30%, so roughly 20 feet. If your addition sets back 20 feet, then your addition may come out 10 feet. I know that's complicated, isn't it? Look at the length of your structure. And so if the length of your structure is, say, 60 feet.
Front to back.
Front to back. Yeah, I'm doing it with my hand gestures, from front to back. Then if your addition sets back 30%, which should be 20 feet, then your addition may come out 10 feet from the side of the structure.
Is that driveway where the 15% is? What, I don't.
Yes, somebody,
So the house is facing, the face of the house is down.
right,
Okay.
the bottom of the slide. This slide shows you someone who, does it show up real well? Shows you where they've done a side addition, but then they've also done a rear addition as well.
And that's okay?
This next slide, we learned the other night that this one is not the one that we are calling the shall approve or the must approve criteria, but this is something that the Historic Commission could actually approve. It is back towards the back. When we do additions to historic structures, we want to think about trying to maintain the integrity of the original structure as much as possible. We learned that this addition on this particular house was done in the late 1920s. So that was kind of interesting. This is an overhead view of a rear addition where you, which is shown in orange, and then the next view it shows how it would look from the street. And then this slide shows you on the left-hand side of the slide is the original house. Back to the right is a rear addition to the house. And then this is another appropriate rear addition to the house. Now, what I'm going to go into now, I'm stepping away from the quote shall approves under the ordinance, and I'm going to show you just a couple of slides where people have added on the front half of their house and would meet the criteria of the ordinance. It just means you have a little more that you're going to have to review for under the Historic Commission. So here's an example where they added some dormers.